Against the Jotun. Frost. The imperial armies have rampaged across Tromsø, slaying the Jarl, bringing down the walls of the Heltavathorn in pursuit of the Pretender. With the Marcher armies in the vanguard, they brought vengeance to the roof of the world. Before the gate of Oxenus Festsal itself, the heroes of Anvil fought and defeated the warriors of the new Jarl, Igja Olgafsdotter. They claimed their ransom, and Matilda Fisher is now in imperial custody. And then, their work done, they withdrew. A measured retreat east, back across the chill taiga and snow-dusted hills, across the forested borders of the Icewood, back into Sermasuak. Even as the Empire quits Tromsø, scouts bring news of an immense Jotun force entering Rikskog from the south. Details are sketchy, beyond the fact that Yrsa Jansdotter, Jarl of Jarls, Queen of Kalsea, leads the armies of the west. An overwhelming response, perhaps inspired by fear that the Empire may despoil Mount Majestint and the graves of the ancestors. With the garrison of Oxenus Festsal and the support of the Fyrds, the Queen's forces move to catch the Imperial invaders. They are too late. The Empire has already quit Tromsø, well on their way to their next engagements. The Jotun quickly reclaim the land the Empire conquered. Any stragglers swiftly fall beneath the hammers and axes of the furious orcs. Under the shifting ribbon of the northern lights, as the snow begins to pile up, silence falls over Tromsø. Game information, Tromsø. Imperial armies have withdrawn from Tromsø. In their absence, a significant Jotun force has swiftly reconquered all the regions taken by the Empire last season. Fire. While the Bounders, the Strong Reeds, and the Fire of the South embark on the long march south, the rest of the Imperial armies do not go far. A brief camp is made at Olgafsdottir's Hole in Tanikapari, and there is an irony to these warriors resting before a castle built by the new Jarl of Tromsø after so recently assailing her home. A short break, long enough to allow the Redwind Corsairs to join them before crossing the border again, but this time further south, into the Iron Stand, into Skalarn. Bloodcloaks, look how we dance in the blood and ice of the north. How can we fight and adapt for our empire? You are my pride. The dragon of Zenith, Aulus Warcaster, comes to bid us welcome Zakalwe's wise heralds to witness your heroism, to learn our weaknesses that we might prove our potential. Welcome, master strategist. You saw the Bloodcloaks fall. See how we soar. Lothyn Bloodcloak, General of the Bloodcloaks. Heroes of the Green Shield, hail to thee. There has been triumph in Tromsø, and we hold to our word. Shield and cloak, a sworn oath. Pursue the path of Guntherm, a dance of din points to delight the servants of shadowed fire. As on the battlefield, so across the border. Forward to the fray, fight with honour. Iron Osric, General of the Green Shield. Freeborn, for years we have answered the choice of the Jotun swordhand. We have let them choose the battlefield, choose the retreat. Now we take the battle to them. We blaze through Iron Stand, and we show the Jotun what the honour and passion of the Freeborn burns on. As on the battlefield, so the campaign. We will show the Jotun that we can fight by their rules and beat them at it. We invite the heralds of Janan to witness our attack. Now, my courageous, burning Freeborn, board them. Delora y Soldevorador y Erigo, General of the Redwind Corsairs. Warriors of the Summer Storm, heralds of Janan. Following our push into Tromsø, we now move back into Skalarn on a balanced attack. Let's fight with wisdom, courage, and the ambition to destroy a fortification there. Let us be passionate in our warfare, and if we have any downtime, then we shall construct a pit and fight. We will continue taking the fight to the Jotun and show them what we can do. Irontide Score, General of the Summer Storm. Jacks of the Tusks, we continue our strike against the Jotun in Ironstand and the fortress in Ulfsmoor. As on the battlefield, so on the campaign. Our fight, as the virtuous honoured, we will show the Jotun that white granite will not shield their lands from the treads of our boots. The imperial frontier expands by the reach of our bills. Stanley of Chalkdown, General of the Tusks. A rift of fire and night. The Green Shield lead the way into Skallan, still accompanied by both the red and gold knights of the Summer Court and the emissaries of Firemuse. They are not alone. Heralds of Jannon also fight with the Red Wind Corsairs and the Summer Storm. Half naked despite the cold, intricate golden tattoos swirling across their crimson skin, they urge the soldiers they battle alongside to give in to their passions, inspiring them to greater and greater acts of heroism and courage. There is obvious friction between the Fey Knights who fight with the Green Shield and these whirling warriors of Jannon, especially since the latter take every opportunity to challenge the servants of Eleonaris, to question their commitment to the cause. While resting, the Scops and Mediators who fight beneath the Green Shield banner are called on several times to intercede, to diffuse the tension between the groups. At least once the army enters Skallan, there are more than enough Jotun to keep the servants of the Lion and the Flame too busy to fight each other. Alongside the armies come more than 60 Imperial captains, leading their warbands into Skallan. An entire additional army made up of fighters from several Imperial nations, especially those of Wintermark and the Imperial Orcs. The Bloodcloaks and the Tusks set the pace, taking advantage of the boons provided to them by Imperial magicians. The Bloodcloaks are also advised by a lieutenant of the Eternals at Calway, his polemarch of strategy. The strategy laid out by the Imperial generals is surely an ambitious one, to trick the Jotun into fighting where they are not, then sweep across the Iron Stand and lay siege to the squat stone keep of the Ulfersborg. Both Wintermark armies fight with honour, ready to step in should their allies forget themselves and give in to the demons of warfare. In particular, they are at pains to make sure there is no wide-scale looting of settlements, no slaughter of civilians or thralls by either side. The Jotun cannot help but be aware of this, and it means that when the Winterfolk fight, their enemies give quarter, and ask for it in return, in the expectation it will be honoured. The Red Wind Corsairs in particular take steps to ensure their Corsairs restrain their natural urges. It was not too long ago that the Winterfolk disparaged the freeborn as little better than maggots. Their behaviour on this campaign goes a long way towards finally burying that unfair stereotype. For their part, the Orcs of the Summer Storm are keen to test themselves against the walls of Ulfersborg, but also against each other. Wherever they establish an armed camp, the Storm cut logs and build fighting pits, exulting in the thunder of the blood and the roar of their ancestors beneath the cold skies of the Jotun lands. Urged on by their fellows, and by the enthusiasm of the heralds of Jannon, they lose themselves in the tumult of the challenge, the clamour of the ancestors. And in that clamour, something unlooked for. Perhaps it is something about this place, about Skallan. Perhaps it is to do with the recent lessons of the Illarorm. Perhaps it is the creatures of the night weaving passion and intuition into their musics. Whatever it is, some of the orcs emerge from these rough fighting pits changed. They speak of hearing a voice, a clear, unambiguous voice of an ancestor. Not the joy of battle voice of Sjofn of the Bitten Blade, although she is there too, in the pit. Not one of the angry slaves. Someone else. Clearly, for the first time, a voice that talks to them in the exhilaration of the pit, urges them to cleave to their fellows, to find their family and make it the heart of them, to keep safe those they love and who love them in return, and to strike mercilessly, absolutely, to destroy anyone or anything that threatens that heart, that love. To rip them apart with bare hands if needs must, to hunt a traitor to the ends of the earth, and further should it come to that. To never forget. Nothing is forgotten, the voice says calmly. Nothing is ever forgotten. There's no name to this voice, not yet anyway. But those who hear it know, without needing to think about it, that it has come from inside and outside at once, an ancestor voice. At first, they might consider it to be a personal, private thing, but as they speak of their experience, haltingly at first, they find others who have heard that same voice, telling them similar things. The more orcs speak of it, the more come forward to admit they heard that voice. The more orcs come out of the fighting pits having heard its echo. There are many more questions than answers. Who is this ancestor? Why do orcs across the summer storm hear its counsel? Why this voice, here, now? The voice doesn't provide answers, of course. What ancestor does? In the cold light of the dawn, blinking, muddled from a night of debating this voice, orcs shake their heads and put aside the world of the spirit for the world of steel and stone. It's time to cross the Iron Plain, to Ulfersburg and the hall of Jarl Otterson. Steadings of the Hills. The plan does not survive contact with the enemy, of course. There is always some unexpected element that sets a strategy unravelling, and the wise general understands this. "Spend no time on the plan," said one clever League general. "Spend all your time thinking on the contingencies for when it all goes wrong." In this case, the unexpected element is the presence of 4 armies of southern Jotun, recently arrived across the Kongagor. They must have marched north with the others, with those busy liberating Tromsø, but these warriors stayed behind in Skalarn. Perhaps the intent is to resupply. Perhaps the wily Jarl of Kirheim or the far-sighted Queen of Kalsea predicted the imperial plan. Perhaps something more political is at work. Either way, the banners of Bjorgthorn Hammerhand, General of the Southern Bear, and the grey owl standard of the Iron Host flutter alongside those of the Jarl in Ulfsborg, while the Bear Who Swims and the Mandauler's Roar enjoy the hospitality of Kirheim. They are a long way from home, but as soon as news of the imperial invasion reaches them, the generals bestir their armies to meet the threat from the east. The Jotun have supernatural allies of their own, albeit fewer than the Empire. Alongside the Southern Bear marches another force of knights drawn from the fields of glory. Tall, orcish warriors in heavy armour, they fight beside a pride of massive golden lions, barded in matching armour. There is a little concern as to what will happen when they face the Green Shield, but in the event, both groups of knights seem to relish the opportunity to test themselves against the other on the field of war, and the servants of Janon in particular revel in the chance to match their passion against the glory of Eleonaris. The path to Ulfsmoor is swiftly blocked by the Southern Bear and the Iron Host, with the other 2 armies moving to attack the imperial flank. All 4 armies use their greater familiarity with the terrain to their advantage, but they do not shy away from conflict. Indeed, the Iron Host in particular seem almost desperate to test the strength of the imperial heroes, especially those of the summer storm. Still before the storm. While there are innumerable skirmishes and short engagements across the stand, In eastern Ulfsmoor, the first major battle takes place in the shadow of the Iron Banner. The fallen fortification built by Emperor Guntherm is where the rich markets of Oversgard are held, and where Jarl Ebba has their hall, built partially into the old walls of the great castle. Control of the ruins, and of Oversgard, represents a major strategic goal when it comes to control of the Iron Stand. Everyone knows the fighting will begin as the sun rises, but in a way the battle really begins shortly before dawn. Bjorgthorn Hammerhand invites the leaders of the opposing armies to meet with him on the field below Oversgard. Two small groups of orcs and humans meet on the frosty field between the great armies drawn up to either side. Both sides eye each other cautiously, but the old Jotun champion radiates an easy confidence. Words are exchanged, a note of bravado here, a note of recognition for clever tactics, a short mention of earlier meetings on the battlefield. Jarl Ebba begins to demand the Empire quit the field, but Bjorgthorn squeezes their shoulder, shaking his head, and their angry words fall silent. Instead, the general quietly recognizes the decision the Imperial forces have made to meet them as equals, to fight with honor, heroically, gloriously, proudly, and courageously. He mentions the freeborn decision to honor the fallen heroes of Fort Braden with a mound. He expresses the belief that their ancestors, the Imperial ancestors, must smile on them in this hour. Things will never return to the way they were, but perhaps there can once again be respect between Jotun and Wintermark, between the orcs of the west and the freeborn of the south. Perhaps there can even be a new understanding between Jotun and Skarsind. Shortly before the sun touches the horizon, the general of the Southern Bear raises a battered drinking horn and invites the Imperial champions to share his toast, to hope for a champion's death in battle that will impress the ancestors enough to see them across the howling abyss. He seems profoundly unconcerned that many of those present are not orcs. Then both groups return to their lines, and as the sun crests in the east, with a terrible roar that must surely shake the heavens, the battle begins. Before the hall of the Iron Jarl. Alone, the Jarls feared would be no match for the armies of the Empire, but they are reinforced by perhaps 20,000 warriors from the south, and maybe as many as 10,000 soldiers from Kierheim and Ulfsborg. Thanks to the presence of the Imperial captains, however, the two forces are almost evenly matched, at least in numbers. The Jotun are resolute. They will not give ground. Yet they also wish to preserve the town, and so refuse to fight within the walls. In truth, their decision makes sense. The walls are hardly built to repel the advance of an imperial army, and the palisades and makeshift barricades they have erected are just as sufficient, without risking the lives of the thralls they seek to protect, or the halls of the Jarls of Iron Stand. For their part, the Bloodcloaks and the Green Shield have no interest in seeing Imperial forces destroy Oversgard or loot its markets. The majority of the fighting takes place in the open, although both sides at various points make use of the ruins scattered around the slopes of the hill. Blood flows. More than 3/4 of all casualties suffered on both sides in the campaign take place in the 3 days of fighting across the hard-packed earth around the long-fallen Iron Banner. At night, when it is too dark to see, both sides collect their injured and their dead and pull back to their own lines. The fronts shift back and forth, first one way, then another. Each night the summer storm light the torches at their improvised fighting pits and celebrate the victories and mourn their losses. The red-winged corsairs light great bonfires that turn the dark to day on the imperial lines, and the tireless heralds of Janin bring the night alive with music that banishes exhaustion and all but replaces sleep for those who join their wild dancing. The Jotun have their own ceremonies, marking the darkest hour of the night with the mournful horns that recognize those who have fallen, and echo with sorrow for those who have fallen into the howling abyss. Then the fighting begins again. The Empire makes early gains, but the Jotun simply refuse to fall back. They don't throw their lives away, but neither do they give up any advantage if there is any way to hold it. As the winter solstice dawns, there is a stalemate below Oversgard. Neither can the Empire take the town, nor can the Jotun defenders conclusively rout them. Both armies remain camped, staring at each other across frozen ground, torn and broken by days of fighting, as curtains of snow fall heedlessly between them. Game information, Skalan. While they have been unable to conquer Oversgard, the Empire has made gains in Skalan. They are a quarter of the way toward taking the Iron Stand, but the Jotun defenders are holding strong. The decision of the Bloodcloaks and the Green Shield to fight with honour has been obvious to everyone in the territory. The Jotun likewise continue to recognise the tactics of Wintermark, and both offer and accept quarter, such that Wintermark casualties are reduced by 1/10. Participation, Skalan. As with those fighting alongside the Burning Falcon in Segura, any character whose military unit was assigned to fight alongside these armies this downtime may choose to have been impacted by the experience of battling in close proximity to heralds of both Eleonaris and Janin. If you possess hero points, you may choose to gain an additional temporary hero point, which, once spent, is permanently gone. It will have faded entirely by the end of the winter solstice regardless. Participation, Imperial Orcs. Any Imperial Orc character of the Sunstorm Sept who travelled to Skalan with the Summer Storm and challenged themselves in one of the fighting pits may have heard this new ancestral voice. It doesn't matter if you assigned a military unit to assist the Summer Storm, only that you roleplay having accompanied the army and participated in the fighting pit. The fighting pit is a spiritual experience for most Imperial Orcs, and it is while blood is pumping and adrenaline is high that the voice was most audible. The voice feels masculine and speaks of the kind of things mentioned in the Wind of War text, the importance of finding and protecting a family, of loyalty or fidelity to loved ones and receiving the same in return, and of absolute commitment to protecting that family and wreaking bloody vengeance on anyone who harms them. The voice is usually quite matter-of-fact, but when it speaks of treachery, betrayal, or traitors, it burns with a palpable fury that may cause an orc to lose their temper and lash out at someone who has wronged them. The voice may also be contagious. Any character who enters the fighting pit during an event and tests themselves against an orc who heard the voice during the Skalan campaign may come to hear it themselves, provided that before entering the fighting pit they consume a dose of one of the Unshackled Gift potions, or are experiencing an effect that explicitly says it is easier to hear ancestors while under it. There's no indication who this voice is, but everyone who has heard it and discussed it with another orc who has had similar experiences agrees it is the same voice, an ancestral voice, loud and clear, heard in the pit beneath the skies of Skalan, shared among members of the Sunstorm Sept. Hill. Rich folk need big dogs. So the truism goes north of the border. The Mornish are dour people who find the cloud in every silver lining. Karaman has never been richer. The passes of the northwest are sealed by rock and baleful forest. The mountain above what was once Redgate Pass shines with the smelting fires. work underway to work begun to bring forth the bounty of the mountain's heart. Across the arid grasslands and the red hills, the hammers of industry fill potholes, lay flags and cobbles, restoring life to tired old roads. Allies help ensure that the prosperity of the freeborn will be protected from the jealous, grasping hands of less happy lands. All is well. But perhaps the Mournish have a point, because no matter how you slice it, Karaman has barely known 6 months of peace in the last 10 years. The Jotun covet its wealth, the Lassambrian Jotun seek to build a kingdom there. Those defences are needed, but in the absence of Fort Braden, the Demiros of the Cinnabar Hills wonder who will stand between them and the next attempt at conquest from the west. One answer might be imperial magicians, of course. The mountains are ideal for the placement of those icy keeps borrowed from the realm of the Mistress of Blizzards. 2 rise in the days following the autumn equinox above Serra Briante and Serra d'Amata. A joke spreads from the Way House to Parador to Labour Camp in the following weeks that perhaps the Imperial Conclave should just make them both permanent enchantments and have done. Few actual magicians laugh at the joke. They have an idea of what that might cost. 2 magical citadels against 3 armies. As reliable as the tides and the moon and the winds in winter, the Lassambrian Jotun invade Karaman, barely a fortnight after the equinox. The Hierro, the Corazon, the Escuta. 15,000 orcs or more. They cannot, of course, directly attack the wealth of the mountains. The passes are closed to them. Rather, they come again to gambit through the sparse beggarwoods. With axe and hammer they make their camps and send their warbands north to test the defences, and east to harry the people of the Jade Range. The magical citadels give them pause, but their scouts nonetheless test the will of the lion-headed ogres that garrison the fort in the foothills above Damata. They are turned back, but they measure the extent both of the heralds' willingness to pursue them and that of the families to fight them. They encounter significantly less resistance in Gambit. Again, village, estate, and Parador fall to them. Again, people receive the choice: stay and serve and keep your wealth, or flee and leave all save your clothes and food for the road behind. The Corazon, as they always do, range ahead of the other 2 armies, stealing and looting. One champion jokes to the freeborn she is robbing that they are become farmers, harvesting wealth from the fields of Karaman as the seasons ebb and flow. Nobody laughs. The Kamkrag are meant to protect against the endless greed of the Corazon, but they are not finished. Those watchtowers and barracks that are complete provide defences to the scattered freeborn soldiers who try, futilely, to hold back the orcs sweeping east through the grassland. But there are still works of work to be completed before they offer any protection. The Corazon do not waste their time trying to destroy the finished structures, but they joyfully plunder work gangs, caravans, and labour camps wherever they encounter them. Stone, tools, supplies, all are stolen away to feed the hunger of the Lassambrian raiders. Behind the Corazon come the Hierro and the Escuta. They are more cautious, perhaps more keenly aware of the changes that have taken place in Karaman since they were last here. Cautious, but not cowardly. Methodically, they secure the land around them, and while their main attention is in the west, they are not shy about sending soldiers out into the rest of the territory. A handful reach as far as Braden's Jassy, and pay their respects at the burial mound that covers the ruins of Fort Braden. While they do not go out of their way to kill those who do not resist, work on both the restoration of the roads and on the Red Depths is horribly disrupted by the presence of the Orc bandits. As the winter solstice nears, work on the great projects commissioned by the Senate has ground to a complete halt. While they do not threaten the building site for the Red Depths directly, they are able to at least partially sever the trade routes transporting the vital materials. In the west, the Lysambrians are well on their way to the complete conquest of Gambit. Game information, Karaman. The presence of the Lysambrian armies, especially the raids of the Khorasan, have significantly delayed work on both the Red Depths and the road restoration. Thanks to the Senate decision to make the Red Depths a freeborn national seat, the Domiro who live in the Cinnabar Hills are, grumblingly, prepared to make up the shortfall in tools and materials caused by the Lysambrian raids, but this will take time. As such, assuming nothing else changes, work on the Red Depths will now not be completed until the start of the spring equinox, assuming the Lysambrians do not do anything further to disrupt it. The work on restoring the roads, however, has been more seriously hit. The Lysambrians have seized around 10 wains of white granite and stripped several work teams of their tools and mundane materials. The white granite will need to be replaced. Worse, the work on the territory-wide project cannot progress while the Lysambrians are rampaging across half of Karaman. Indeed, if they capture any regions, it won't be possible to complete the project until they are removed. Thanks to the presence of the magical citadels in the mountains, the Orcs are just over 3/5 of the way toward conquering the region of Gambit. Storm clouds and stone. Conjunctions. 3 opportunities for the heroes of Anvil to use the Sentinel Gate to face the Jotun have been identified as the winter solstice draws closer. For the moment, they are little more than teasers, but more information will be provided before the summit. The Falcon, Karaman. A warband of Jotun have captured Erdene Batagwin, a respected Faradin builder-architect supporting the road restoration project in Karaman. This skirmish is a combat highly likely encounter. The Azure Soutenier is responsible for rescuing the Faradin architect. While the Lysambrians are primarily interested in conquest and lightning raids, they are not the only Western Orcs in Karaman. Several warbands of the true Jotun accompany them, and it is one of these bands that intercepts a retreating caravan in Braden's Jassy. Primarily made up of Faradin of the Batagwin family, who had been visiting the Azure Chorus, the Orcs quickly overwhelmed the guards and offered the choice. Some of the Freeborn and Faradin managed to reach the relative safety of the Azure Chorus. The Jotun do not go out of their way to attack sites of spiritual importance. Unfortunately, one of those taken as a thrall by the Orcs was a Batagwin builder-architect, the well-respected Erdene Batagwin. They accepted the choice of being a thrall rather than slain, and are accompanying the Jotun as they begin their journey back towards the border with Rhinos. As the Azure Soutenier is responsible for protecting those who visit the temple, they are ultimately responsible for rescuing the Faradin architect. The Batagwin have already delivered the building supplies and funds supporting the road building project, but if they are carried away by the Jotun, this would represent a serious diplomatic incident with the Faradin. The ambassador to Faradin in particular might wish to ensure this does not happen. Assuming Erdene can be returned safely to their family, the Batagwin will feel an obligation to offer thanks to the Azure Soutenier. They are not only wealthy, but well respected in Faradin for their building prowess. Wolf Dreams, Skalan. Jarl Ebba of Overguard has called on the Fyrd of Iron Stand. This skirmish is a combat highly likely encounter. The Imperial Seer is responsible for stopping the Jarl of Greenwall. As the Imperial armies advance into Iron Stand, the Jarl Ebba of Overguard sends out another call to arms. Jarl Ebba calls on the Jotun of the region who owe them fealty to rise up against the warriors of the Empire and come together to form a Fyrd. If the Fyrd is raised, it will support the Jotun armies in their defence of Skalan. Delphisius, the Polemarch of Strategy, a herald of Zakalwi accompanying the Bloodcloaks on campaign, has determined where Jarl Ebba will be during the summit. Partly in response to the request the Archmage of Day has made of their master, they have presented a plan to deal with the Jarl before the Fyrd has fully gathered. A decapitation strike will rob the Iron Stand of its leader at a crucial moment and throw the defenders into disarray. Delphisius has requested that the Imperial Seer, who they believe to be a citizen of Wintermark, take the lead on this strategic strike. The polemarch suggests that the Seer liaise with the people of Wintermark, but also with the Freeborn, Imperial Orcs and Marchers, all of whose soldiers are involved in fighting in the territory, and see what aid they are prepared to provide to the attack. If the Jarl is dealt with, no Fyrd will form an Iron Stand for at least the next year. Ebba's successor will need to wrestle with the shadow of dishonour that will hang over the warriors of the region for letting their Jarl be slain. If they are not dealt with, the Fyrd will be raised, and in response to the recent invasions and raids from the Empire, will attract significantly more champions than it might have otherwise. The resulting Fyrd will be twice the normal strength, and may see Jarl Ebba become a champion of the Jotun in their own right, meaning that if the Jotun defend Skalarn, they may continue to fight the Empire in other territories. Regardless, Aegon, Polemarch of Clarity, a respected lieutenant of Sir Calway in their own right, has expressed a keen interest in discussing the outcome of the skirmish with the Seer during the spring equinox. Fyrds. Each region in a Jotun territory generates a Fyrd when it is conquered by the Empire. As the Jarl and their warriors are forced to retreat from their lands, they form up into a Fyrd, a warband with a military strength of 500. A Fyrd is unable to act independently of fortifications or armies in the territory. It will only act to support a Jotun army in the territory, or a fortification if there are no armies present. A region's Fyrd can be dismantled by killing the Jarl, or through other opportunities. Threads in the pattern. Liathavan. A warband of Jotun are on their way to slaughter a Fenni enclave. This skirmish is a combat highly likely encounter. The Imperial advisor for the Fenni is responsible for stopping the Jotun. The strange creature, described as having the mask of a jackdaw and a cloak of feathers, that was first spotted near the Old Pig and Freemore, startled the poor beaters. First heralds of the Mother of Rex in Mitwald, then scions of the Cold Sun in Bregasland, now whatever this thing is. This thing turned out to be Halka, a herald of the Ancient One, with a request for those that are willing to right a wrong. It seems a warband of Jotun belonging to an ambitious young would-be champion named Ursa Longarm are moving to assault a small community of Fenni in the depths of Liathavan. The Fenni settlement lies within a chamber of the Eldest, but somehow Ursa has discovered its location, and more importantly, the location of the wards that deny access to trespassers. Those same Fenni have spent the last year or so raiding Jotun encampments, and the orcs are out for vengeance. As far as the Black Crow can determine, however, Ursa has not shared their information with the rest of their people, hoping to gain status and respect by dealing with the threat alone. If the Jotun are able to destroy the wards, then the settlement will be exposed, and the orcs will be free to take their reprisals against the residents. Wise Rangara either cannot or will not aid the Fenni directly. Rather, she wants the people of the Marchers to do so. If the Marchers are prepared to stop these Jotun, then Grandmother Winter will consider them to have atoned for their role in the killings of the Fenni of Alderley. Specifically, Halka suggests that if the Imperial advisor for the Fenni really wants to make amends for destroying a community that had lived quietly in the woods for 1,000 years, and for driving many of their warriors into the arms of that bastard Agrement, they should take the lead on dealing with the Jotun. Given this is a direct request to the Imperial advisor for the Fenni, it is their responsibility to stop Ursa Longarm and the rest of the Jotun.